Combat mages. That's the archetype I always seem to seek out in ARPGs, to combine martial prowess with magical wickedness. And if you are searching for just the last Epoch planner or time code to navigate the video a little quicker, you can find them in the description box below. Otherwise, stick around and welcome to the Wolves Grow channel. My name is Ace, and I'm showcasing the start of a brand new build. As I said, a combat mage archetype. We are combining melee attacks and do wonderful magical spells as well. You can see the flashiness on the screen right here. This is during my leveling process in one of the monoliths, right before I reached empowered monoliths. So this is very early stages still, and it's already incredibly tanky and does incredible clear. It's a little slower than I was hoping for, but then again, I don't have a lot of movement speed yet, and there's a lot of quality of life to get. And I'm still walking around in certain leveling pieces, and yet I am already this strong, having seen crits cross 30, hitting nearly 40k, and being able to face tank every boss so far, including the more dangerous mechanics with my flame ward up. It's surprisingly potent. So certainly promising as we move forward. However, it is unfortunately based around a unique, but we'll go over the passive tree, we'll go over the skill tree, as well as the gear, some of the blessings, kind of what we're looking for, how the build is kind of put together, and hopefully this will inspire you, and if nothing else, it will give you a heads up about what I am doing. As I said, this is a new build, a new dream, and hopefully it will work out just as awesomely as the werebear we played previously. Combat mages. That is a thing I like, but I also like taking a single stat and turning it into offense as well as defense. And this build does that wonderfully too. It's the best of both worlds for me. It is a in-stacking, spark charge generating, attack speed, cooldown recovering combat mage that crits really hard. It's a bit of a long title. I'll workshop it, but I'll go through all the points here. The passive tree will be first. Quick shout out to Perry the Pig. I kind of got stuck on the passive tree from level 95 to 100, and he helped me out with those last 5 points, allowing me to not only become slightly more tanky as well, but also generate more damage. There is a different version, the one that I was creating or finishing off with, which has a bit of a death-defying effect involved. Pseudo death defy, which I will show as well in case you prefer that. But yeah, you can go either way. The rest is all the same. 25, 8, 80. That's the distribution here. Let's start at the beginning. Intellect. We pick that up, as well as the resistance, elemental damage. Lightning damage is the source, the damage type we are doing. So just a little bit more dam. We'll pick up attack speed. That's the engine of the build. Allows us to debuff, keep our own buffs up, generate more sparks, get mana back. It's a whole thing. And we can attack at range with auto attacks, which is lovely. Knowledge of destruction, crit chance, as well as crit multi. An incredible solid numerical node. And speaking of incredible solid numerical nodes, which brings us to the sorcerer. Once you have sufficient intellect, you want to pick up calculated destruction here. Look at that 5-point bonus. Increased spell critical strike chance per intelligence. Love it. Allowing us to not only scale just the raw damage, but also the multiplying damage through crits, and then also crit multi. Not that we can skill crit multi, but you know what I mean. Crits are good. It's more damage. Love that. Spellblade, 80. This is chunky, so buckle up. We'll pick up the elemental damage with resistance for easier gear and more dam. Arcane wards. Ward gained is the defensive layer of this build, or a big part of it at least. We'll talk about these last 2 notes right here at the end. Arcane shielding, which then gives way to Shattered Aegis, which is just a buff we can keep up on ourselves by attacking. And then we take less damage through increased armor scaling, as well as just DR and more ward gain. It's very lovely. Stormblade, it's a little bit more damage on melee strike, which is not really the big thing here. The spark charge chance with lightning melee attacks is incredible, because our basic attack is lightning, as well as our surge, which is a big melee attack, which triggers a spell. All lightning, so more spark charges equals better damage, single target as well as clear. Essence duel, more attack speed with ward gained, more offense, more defense. You will see that a lot of things are like interwoven in this build to be offensive and defensive. I love it. Speaking of things that are not that, this is just to smooth out the mana gain. Little bit of health, chance to gain mana. We are attacking really, really quickly, so this doesn't add up to the point where you don't have to spend 5 points in it. So you might not even have to spend 3 points in it, but it does help, especially in the early to mid game, to really smooth out that mana curve. And then we have Burden of Knowledge. This is just free spell damage, plus 20. Absolutely good value right here because we don't cast anything. We trigger our spell casts. So we don't use cast speed. So this is free. Definitely worth picking up. This is a mandatory note, not just for the health and the ward retention, but our Surge is the primary big spell that we really can do a lot of damage with and do a wonderful amount of clear as well if everything is grouped up. So getting that cooldown recovery for that Surge is going to be mandatory. And this does just that wonderfully. Then we have more intellect, ward per second, and then the real gift that keeps on giving is ward per second per 10 intelligence. So this allows us to scale crit chance, ward per second, and the intellect itself scales ward retention because that's what intellect does natively. And then we also have an item that scales the raw damage of our spark charges on top of that. An incredible combination of everything. But let us bring us back in time to the Warden's Echo, which is the travel note after Arcane Warden. This just gives you a chance to do another hit attack. The more hits we can generate, the more chances we have to apply spark charges. More spark charges, more damage. More hits, also more debuffs, but that's not really all important. It's all about the spark charges. And on top of that, if we then go to the next node, we get ward retention 40%. So that's more ward, as well as a little bit more elemental burst damage. But that's not really the most important thing. However, if you want to be even tankier, you could spec out of these points. And you could spec into, I guess you could keep it like this and go back into mage. I think you need 6 points. And then you take 1 point in reactive ward to travel all the way up to warden right here. This way you have a small reactive ward that triggers at 70% health. Not 70% ward, 70% health. And then you also have 50% ward retention. If you want to be even tankier or feel like you're on hardcore, you can also drop all of this down here. You have to take a point in Fireblood then, if that's the case. But then you can go back here and even spec this out for even more value to make sure you don't get surprise murdered. But if you play on softcore, I would recommend getting rid of all these points right here and do what was originally presented here. Max these nodes out. It adds up perfectly at level 100 and gives you another chance for more spark charges and a little bit more damage or reduction anyway through increased ward retention anyway beyond that, which is really, really nice. So that's the passive tree for you. So let us talk about the very skills we'll be using. Our skills will be Mana Strike, Static, Flame Ward, Surge, as well as Enchant Weapon. Let's start at the beginning though with Mana Strike, the very engine of the skills, so to speak. This is our basic attack, which we can do from a large distance. Mana Strike is ranged. We get a lot less mana as a result, however. But it's also auto-targeting with a little bit of base crit, which is very nice. Now, we can facilitate mana gain properly by speccing into Arcanist Blade or going down here through Mana Spark with 2 points and then picking up Celestial Precision and then Critical Mana. So we will get our mana back. Make sure you have significant mana gain before you spec further into the left. We also want to pick up Spark Charges right here, 100%, to apply the very thing that allows us to do damage, the very thing that is our build based for. Absolutely great, mandatory even. And then we pick up Explosive Flurry as well as Essence of Control after Mana Storm, which allows us to do additional hits. More hits on more enemies means more applications of spark charges, more damage, more explosions, more shotgunning. It's incredibly good. However, be warned, if you go with Mana Storm and you go into Explosive, without going into Explosive Flurry or Essence of Control, you're going to be without mana. It's going to be rough unless you have some way of dealing with that. Now, Static, wonderful spell. This is one of our spells that would cost way too much mana if we didn't trigger it. Luckily enough for us, we're going to be triggering it with Surge, so don't worry too much about it. This is going to be a pretty straightforward. version, we're just going to try to find ways to gain more charges. This in case is more charges when hit. This is when we attack. We are then going to store all of those charges and more. And then based on our charges, we have a little bit more range, which allows for clear to be a little smoother. You could, in theory, go even further, but it's really not necessary. Empower. This is what you want to pick up, followed by Electrify for more base crit, because we are a crit build after all, and this is our burst. We pick up Surge on top of that as well, which allows us to gain more charges back while we have discharged recently for 3 seconds. And then based on the charges we had when we discharged, we can even hit more targets. Makes clear very smooth. We also have this node down here, Power Surge. If you want to pick this up, make sure you have the trigger already spec'd, because if you pick this up and you want to hardcast it while you're still leveling, you're just going to be out of mana constantly. It is too much mana cost. Don't pick this up while you're still leveling. Pick this up after you've picked up Action Surge trigger for it. Now, we also have to stay alive. The basic Flame Ward attack on the mage is pretty much what we're going to do. We pick up the extra charge right here with the least amount of possible nodes possible. 2 in Stalwart Defense, 1 in Desperate Defense. Fuel the Flames gets 2, so we can pick up Dual Aegis. We also have the option to get another charge, a third charge from the chest, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. We enhance our defense with 5 out of 5 barrier, 3 out of 3 prismatic buffer. And of course, we want to also make sure that our uptime on that defensive layer stays as long as possible, which is duration 33. Then we take a fire aura here, which is just a travel node. So we may get Frost Ward, which then allows us to gain a flat 200 armor, which is insane. 200 armor while your flame ward is up is incredible. Now, it's a pretty much, there's no real synergy here. It's just defensive. It's an incredible defense, though. It's probably one of the better ones in the game that I've experienced so far. So really worth doing. Actions of, I keep calling it Action Surge, which is a D&D term, but no, Surge. This is the big move that allows us to trigger static for a lot of damage. And this also helps us proc even more sparks. As you can see on the top here, the mandatory 4 out of 4 charged movement, giving us a guaranteed spark charge on all those who are hit. And remember, this is an electrical melee attack, and in the passive tree, there was a chance to gain spark charges on every electrical melee attack. So we even have chances to get more than 1 spark charge when we surge. It's incredible. And that's just the attack, not to speak about the static that can happen. A lot of synergy. I just love it. We pick up the mandatory travel nodes, including the 2 lightning rush right here to pick up invulnerability. This is very clutch in moments, and also since you're using it so often, you will be continuously having a moment of invulnerability, which does add up to a defensive layer. We pick up the mandatory conduit right here. Then we take static buildup. We do fill it up to 4 in this version due to getting more static charges. After we picked up discharge, which allows us to cast static on arrival after using surge. And then also capacitor for more static charges when you hit with surge. So if you don't have 21 points, you want to get 3 out of 5. And then once you have 21 points, you go 4 out of 5. That's pretty much the surge itself. So not really a lot of damage scaling here, just more the static stuff as well as more sparks. Because like I said, sparks are our damage. The application is what we want to facilitate. And then last but not least, we have Enchant Weapon right here, which is a lovely little buff where we make sure we can stay up as long as possible together with reduced mana cost, which makes it free. So you can numlock it or hold it down. I hold it down. Some people numlock it. Some people macro it. It's up to you. I'm not going to tell you what to do. And then you also want to pick up some points right here, especially the mandatory conduit, which allows you to generate more zaps, which count as a hit, which means you can potentially generate more sparks. We do a zap frequency of 150 because I want to get more attack speed with the buff active, and more attack speed is important because that is certainly more spark charges, as well as more generation and debuffing and buffing. Now, right now I have cleansed by elements, as in my on my current live version of my build, as I'm still leveling. I don't have ward on belt yet, which is what I'm looking for. Once I have achieved that, I might remove that and put that into more attack speed. Otherwise, I might just keep it this way because having additional cleanse is not bad. And even with the 50% mana cost, it's still free. So it doesn't hurt me anything. And having an extra cleanse could be really, really huge in getting rid of those very awkward dots that may ruin you, or a chill, or something that's going to ruin your day as you're trying to get out of a one-shot mechanic, right? So that's pretty much the skills for you. And last but not least, let's talk about the idols, the blessings, and the gear itself. We'll go through it. The blessings are very straightforward. We are, after all, crit build, so we want crit multi. We do lightning damage, so we shred lightning resistance. We want to fix our resistances, so we use all res. And then we have increased armor for hit defense and such, as well as flat armor. Very straightforward. The rest is blessings for whatever you are farming in the moment. So that's up for you to decide and whatever you find. The two mandatory idols are, well, the Ornate Glass Idol, the 4x1, which gives you cooldown recovery speed for Surge, which is the primary one that you want. And you want to follow that up with a chance to apply Spark Charge on melee hit. You want 2 of those, and that's it. That's only really what you need. Aside from that, the small ones, the 2x1s or the 1x1s, are just designed to get more resistances. That's pretty much their only purpose. And then once you have your resistance assorted, you want to find equal ones to not ruin your resistance, but maybe some vitality, or maybe some armor, if you prefer that, or ward retention. Get some armor maybe. It's up to you to decide how to fill that in. As long as you have the 2 big ones and your resistances are sorted, you are good to go. Now, mandatory unique, Fragment of Enigma, this is what we build around. The build works without it, but it doesn't shine with it. This is the real thing why this build exists. The LP is not necessary, so don't worry too much about that. The LP is just more of a footnote, what to search for. Spell crit, we are a crit build after all. But other than that, get the fragment, you'll pop off. The Prismatic Gaze is the unique you really want. The build works with it, but you lack a significant amount of base crit as a result of not having the skull in the offhand. So Prismatic Gaze will give us base crit back, as well as a bunch of other useful stuff. If you don't have Prismatic Gaze, a really good crit crafted helm may help you carry over, or otherwise, if you are lazy or lucky, you can maybe get a Peak of the Mountain, maybe get some LP there, put some extra crit on it, maybe some cooldown reduction if that is possible, maybe Spark Chance, or anything useful, and that should be able to carry you over, because we are not leeching health from critical strikes, because we are ward based. So that's not really a big issue right there. Aside from that, we are using a Mystic Plate to help facilitate critical strike avoidance. We are not capped on average. If we are maxing it out, we are. So if you have a good couple of high rolls. However, if you manage to get 2 rings with critical avoidance exalt, which is what you're kind of hoping for, you can switch this plate into a Celestial Raiment, because then you don't need the crit avoidance anymore. You can go critical strike multiplier if you want to go for the dam in the end, right? So, but until you are critical strike avoidance capped without this chest, you want to run it, because it's just better, because death makes nobody do damage, not even a lich. We use a rune dagger because of the base crit. Other than that, it's pretty much just a stat stick. We are using it also to make sure we can apply the big shred armor. Chance to chill is always useful, just to slow the enemy down. But the shred armor is the big one. You can stack up so much shred armor with it. Attack speed, and critical strike multiplier, because we're a crit build. Not to forget the bone amulet, also important. Spell crit and crit multi. And after that, it's just using it for a chance to apply frailty or shredding armor, depending on how you're specing your glove. And then just whatever resistance you can find to cap out your resistances. Mind you, just because it says on the build here necrotic resistance doesn't mean it has to be necrotic resistance. It could be poison resistance or elemental resistance or anything else that you may need to round it out, right? The resistances are flexible across multiple pieces of gear. You just kind of have to fill it out with what you get. Of course, for a belt, we want a typical ward gain belt with health and increased health, just to have a little bit of life pool, together with a little bit of lightning damage. Just very basic stuff. I think this is pretty much the best in slot belt for a lot of builds. We are running double, in a perfect world, we are running a double opal ring for the cooldown recovery speed, as well as intelligence, because we are intellect stacking with lightning damage and critical strike avoidance. And then we use the final suffix to fix up whatever needs to be fixing. In this case, resistances. As you can see, poison resistance and void resistance on this particular build, but it could be necrotic resistance. You can just switch these out, right? Like it's interchangeable, the resistances, as long as you have them. For boots, very specific as well. Intelligence, movement speed, cooldown recovery, and a little bit of health. Very basic, not too difficult to grab. As well as the gloves. These are a little bit more tricky. Melee attack speed is the best in slots. You could go for area, which is a new mod, but that's up to you. I think attack speed would be my preference. Intelligence, because we're stacking that. Health, because health. And shred armor. However, if you get chance to shred or chance to apply frailty, that's okay as well, as long as you then get chance to apply armor shred or the armor shred mechanic on your amulet. They're interchangeable. Just make sure you have 2 shred on your gear, 1 from your weapon, and then the other one from gloves or bone, or for your bone amulet, or from your amulet in general, and then also frailty ones. Very simple. Some flexibility there. And then for the relic, it's the crit relic, because we're a crit build. Intellect stacking, spell crit, because crit, and then of course the double resistance to round out your build so you don't die. Very basic stuff. It's a bit of a puzzle, but that's half the point of an ARPG, to find the right gear to make the best build to pop off. So hopefully this will help you create your own Spellblade. If you want to see my progression, you can find me on twitch.tv/wolvesgorar. Otherwise, I'll post an update video once it's further along to show you some of the end game, maybe some tier 4s, maybe some high corruption. Who knows what the future has in store. Either way, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. I'm out.